Hey everyone, welcome back to Coach Hall Writes. In today's video, I'm going to give you 8 quick tips to help you with your rhetorical analysis essay. The first tip is to include the rhetorical choices and the message, argument, or purpose in your thesis. When you're writing your thesis, you don't actually need to say, the writer makes many rhetorical choices such as, just tell us the rhetorical choices that you're going to write about in your essay. For most students, this is usually 2 or 3 rhetorical choices. When you're writing out your rhetorical choices, try to emphasize strong verbs. So many teachers call these rhetorically accurate verbs. When you're writing your thesis, try to include strong verbs as opposed to saying something like uses repetition. Instead, you could say repeats and then say the phrase that they repeat or the type of word that they repeat. Instead of saying something like uses juxtaposition, you could say juxtaposes or contrasts. The stronger verbs help your thesis. It's also really important that you read the prompt carefully because it's going to ask you to connect the rhetorical choices to one of 3 things: the message, argument, or purpose. I tell my students to underline what they're being asked to write about because it's really important that you include that in both your thesis and the body paragraphs. Now, technically speaking, I have seen some thesis statements earn the thesis point without actually mentioning the message, argument, or purpose. However, these thesis statements weren't very strong. And since the thesis point is relatively easy to earn, we want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for a strong argument. Therefore, you should include the choices and the message, argument, or purpose. Now, sometimes the College Board will actually tell you the message, argument, or purpose in the prompt itself. In these instances, while it is okay to use their wording, I recommend that you use a synonym or that you dig deeper, because usually what they give you is surface level, and if you truly want to demonstrate that you understood the passage, you're going to need to be more specific. When you're writing your thesis, it can really help to use a sentence frame. That way you can save time. I have a few sentence frames that I give my students, but I've included one here for you. Now, I already mentioned this a little bit with the thesis, but it's important to include rhetorically accurate verbs. And quite frankly, this goes beyond the thesis because it helps your body paragraphs too. So remember that a rhetorical choice is basically something that the writer or speaker intentionally does. So rhetorically accurate verbs could include acknowledges, justifies, reminds, compares, contrasts, provides examples. The list goes on. If you're ever stuck trying to come up with a rhetorical choice, ask yourself, what is the writer doing? When answering that question, students typically answer with a verb, and so that would be appropriate to write about in your paper. As I said before, the goal is to avoid uses simply because it's a lower level verb. We also want to remember that choices create appeals. So rather than focusing on logos, ethos, pathos, focus on the rhetorically accurate verb that's happening in that section. We also want to remember that choices create appeals. So instead of saying something like the writer uses logos, we want to figure out what the writer is actually doing in order to make that logical appeal. If you're interested in learning about how to write about the appeals effectively, I do have a video about this on my channel. I'll link it in the iCards above and also in the description box below. Another tip is to analyze the passage chronologically. So chronologically means that we're examining it in order. This helps because we're actually following the writer or speaker's line of reasoning. So after you've read and annotated the passage, divide the passage into 2 or 3 parts. So for example, you could think of it as the first half and second half, or the beginning, middle, and end. Look for shifts in topic, choice, or tone, and remember that the sections do not have to be equal in length. While it's helpful to divide the passage up chronologically, you don't want to actually refer to it as chunks or sections in your essay. Instead, you can use verbs like begins, continues, and concludes to indicate which portion of the passage you're talking about. All right, now that we've gone over some of the basic tips, let's get into some of the more advanced tips. One thing you want to do as you're writing a rhetorical analysis essay is to consider the relationship between the speaker and audience. So you want to ask yourself, what is the speaker's relationship to the audience? What do they have in common? You also want to ask yourself if it's a friendly relationship, a reluctant relationship, or even a hostile relationship. Once you've determined that type of relationship, then figure out how that relationship influences the choices that the speaker makes. Because remember, speakers tailor their message to their audience. They make choices based on who their audience is and the occasion at which they're speaking. So understanding that relationship between the speaker and the audience will help you understand why they're making those choices. And if you understand why they're making the choices, then you're starting to analyze, which means you're going to have more commentary. We also want to ask ourselves, what are the writer or speaker's needs, beliefs, desires, and values? And that question can also be applied to the audience as well. Once we've determined both the speaker and the audience's needs, beliefs, desires, and values, then we want to think about how these concepts are reflected in the speaker's choices or the message, argument, or purpose. As you're writing your rhetorical analysis essay, it's very helpful to have effective topic and concluding sentences. Make sure that you have a clear claim or main idea for each body paragraph, and make sure that it relates back to your thesis. On the slide here, I've given you some sentence frames that you can use to help your topic sentences. The last one on the slide is more of a concluding sentence. Concluding sentences can be very helpful because it reminds your reader of the main idea of the paragraph and it helps connect back to the thesis. So while it might seem simple, don't overlook the power of an effective topic and concluding sentence. I recently posted a video on my channel all about writing an effective topic sentence for each of the FRQs. So if you'd like more information about rhetorical analysis topic sentences or topic sentences for the synthesis and argument essays, then definitely check out that video. I'll link it in the iCards above as well as the description box below. In my opinion, the commentary of a rhetorical analysis essay is kind of like the make it or break it point. And that's because on the rubric, students can earn up to 6 points for an essay. Of those 6 points, up to 4 of them come from row B, evidence and commentary. The problem with commentary, though, is that students often write limited commentary, so their explanations are often repetitive or simplistic, and oftentimes they fail to connect the choice to the message, argument, or purpose, which is what the prompt was asking. So let's talk about some quick tips to help you develop your commentary. First of all, you can add a because clause. And yes, you can do this more than once per paragraph. So a because clause is basically what it sounds like. You use the word because, and then you finish the sentence. Keep asking yourself why, and then answer it with because. Commentary is your analysis. It is essentially the why of the essay. Why did the speaker make this choice for this audience on this occasion? So keep asking yourself why and use the word because to generate more commentary. Oftentimes, students want to use the verb shows in order to generate more commentary. And while there's nothing wrong with the word shows, it's kind of like the verb uses, it's just a little bit lower level. There are some alternatives that I think will work well for you. You could try demonstrates, highlights, illustrates, suggests, reveals, or even underscores, which means emphasizes. And yes, you can use emphasizes too. Using these verbs will help signal to your reader that you are generating commentary. And because I've given you multiple verbs here, you can use them interchangeably in most cases, but that way you won't be using the same verb over and over again, so your essay will seem less redundant. As I said before, one great way to develop your commentary is to ask yourself this question: why does the speaker make this choice for this audience on this occasion? And be sure to connect the rhetorical choice to the message, argument, or purpose, whichever one your prompt was asking you for. While commentary is absolutely crucial in your essay, we can't overlook the evidence. So typically, evidence comes first, and then we have our commentary. Now, with evidence, you have either a direct quote or a paraphrase. One problem I see with a lot of student essays, though, is that students tend to use really long quotes, and they just drop them into their essay. That's really jarring for your reader. So select a short, direct quote and embed it into a sentence of your own. For the rhetorical analysis essay on the AP Lang exam, you do not need to include citations. Now, for the synthesis essay, you do, and if you are writing a college essay or an in-class essay for your teacher, it's possible that you would need citations, but for the exam, you don't need to cite the line or paragraph number, which is honestly probably a good thing because it's one less thing slowing you down. As you're writing your paragraph, you will likely want at least 2 to 3 pieces of evidence to support your claim or your main idea. Each piece of evidence should be followed by commentary. Try to create layers, meaning you're going to have your topic sentence, evidence to prove that claim, commentary about that evidence, then transition to more evidence that proves that claim, and then more commentary that explains that evidence, and then a concluding sentence. That's kind of like just a rough outline of what a body paragraph could look like. Some more advanced writers include more than 2 layers, but the idea is that we want to make sure we are thoroughly proving our claim, and one piece of evidence is not very convincing. Now, one question I often get about this, though, when I tell students to create layers of evidence and commentary is, what if we're only examining one thing, like one anecdote or one example, but it's a big example? How do we pull multiple pieces of evidence from that? Well, you can quote different parts of the example. And because you're using short quotes, sometimes as small as one word, it makes it easier to incorporate multiple pieces of evidence. For more information about how to write a rhetorical analysis body paragraph, check out this video here that I'm going to link in the iCards as well as the description box below. Another tip is to situate the issue in a broader context. Technically speaking, this is one way to earn sophistication. However, as I tell my students, I almost prefer that they ignore the sophistication point and pretend it doesn't exist most of the time because it is so difficult to get. That being said, we can use the different elements of sophistication to try to improve our commentary. So even if we don't get the sophistication point, we know that we've grown as a writer and we've written a better essay. So for this one, what I would recommend is if you're going to write a conclusion, try to look at the historical impact of the passage or the time period, or ask yourself how the message or argument is relevant today. Now, let's say you don't have time for a conclusion, but you have really good insight into either the historical context or how the message, argument, or purpose is relevant today. If that's the case, then try to incorporate that into the commentary of the last body paragraph that you're going to write. All right, and there you have it. Those are 8 quick tips for rhetorical analysis essays. If you found this video helpful, please do me a huge favor and subscribe here on YouTube. Also, if you're preparing for the AP Lang exam, I would love it if you would go follow me on TikTok. I offer quick tips over there as well. Also, before you go, be sure to check out the description box below where you'll find links to other videos and resources that will help you prepare for the AP Lang exam. Until next time, happy writing!